Hi, my name's Chanel, and I used to think being adopted by the Danvers family was the lucky break of my life. Until the day I refused to sign away my inheritance, and my mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "We should have left you at the orphanage." Since then, I've been erased from family accounts, called unstable in newspapers, and forced to prove I belonged in the life I helped build. But what hurt most wasn't the lie. It was knowing they planned it. Quietly, carefully, long before I ever asked a question. So, what do you do when the people who raised you try to write you out of existence? The text from my mother came out of nowhere, dressed in faux warmth and nostalgia. "We're throwing a little birthday celebration for Lori. It'd mean a lot if you came." Just that. No emojis, no apologies, no hint of the rift we hadn't spoken about in years. I stared at the message, rereading it until the letters blurred. There was a time when I might have ignored it, convinced it was bait, or worse, a guilt trip. But something inside me flickered. Hope, foolishness, or maybe just curiosity. It had been so long since someone in that family addressed me, like I was still part of them. Maybe this is the first step toward reconciliation. I whispered out loud, almost daring myself to believe it. 2 days later, I drove up to the Danvers estate in Fort Collins. The house looked exactly as I remembered it, tall, cold, and perfect. The hedges trimmed with surgical precision, the windows glinting like secrets. It smelled of old money and even older resentment. I parked behind a line of luxury cars and stepped out, adjusting my jacket. No one greeted me. Not the staff, not Lori, not Carla. I rang the doorbell even though I knew the code, because it felt like I wasn't allowed to assume anything anymore. A maid opened the door with a polite nod. "They're in the dining room." As I stepped inside, the hush hit me first. That hush that lives in houses where affection is performed, not lived. The air felt colder than outside, though the fireplace flickered in the corner. I didn't expect a hug, but I expected someone to at least pretend. Instead, I was quietly ushered down a hallway, not toward the sounds of laughter and glasses clinking, but to a side room lined with leather chairs and a long polished table. Waiting for me were 2 men in gray suits. One sat with a stack of documents. The other stood, arms crossed. At the head of the table, Carla sat with her signature cocktail and that tightly curated smile. "Sweetheart," she said, standing up slowly, "before we head to dinner, let's just take care of a little housekeeping. These gentlemen are from Peterson and Hale, legal facilitators. Nothing formal, just family business." My throat tightened. "What is this?" "Just some inheritance clarifications," she said, waving a hand like she was brushing away dust. "It'll take 5 minutes. Lori and I already talked about it." I looked at the stack in front of me. My name, full, legal, sat atop the first page in bold type. The header read, "Transfer and waiver of beneficiary rights." I didn't need to read past the first 2 lines. It was a complete surrender. Every asset my father left behind, the house, the foundation, his personal trust. My jaw clenched. "This isn't about Lori's birthday." Carla's smile didn't falter. "Of course it is. But while we're all together, why not tie up loose ends?" "I'm not signing this," I said, quieter than I meant to. "Not tonight. Not ever." Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. The warmth flickered out. "You always make things difficult, Chanel." I stood up. "I came for family, not contracts." She sighed, as if I'd ruined a perfectly choreographed performance. "If you walk out now, don't expect another invitation." I didn't respond. I turned on my heel and stepped into the hallway, pulse drumming in my ears. I wasn't shaking, not from fear, not from anger, but from clarity. I stopped near the powder room, needing a second to breathe. On the hallway console, Lori's iPad blinked. A notification hovered on the screen. I didn't mean to look, but it was right there. A text from Lori to Carla. "She doesn't deserve anything. Let her rot." I blinked. My stomach dropped. The illusion that this was a miscommunication, that maybe I was being too harsh, cracked wide open. I walked out through the main dining room where everyone had gathered, glasses in hand, smiles painted on. Conversations paused as I passed. Eyes turned. No one spoke. Outside, the night air wrapped around me like a warning. I reached my car, shut the door, and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I opened the banking app, the family trust account Garrett had once insisted I be included on. My name was gone. They hadn't just planned tonight. They'd been erasing me for weeks. The silence that filled my apartment after the party felt different this time. It wasn't the kind of silence that came after a long day or a moment of peace. It was hollow, a vacuum left by something pulled out of me without warning. And deep down, I already knew. This wasn't the end of their plan. It was the beginning. I sat on the edge of my bed, the light from my phone screen reflecting off the window behind me. My banking app still open, still showing what wasn't there. My name, my rights, my connection. I blinked, locked the screen, then reopened it, as if repetition might change the outcome. It didn't. I opened the laptop on my nightstand, fingers moving almost robotically. First, the Danvers Family Trust dashboard. Invalid login. Then, the insurance portal. Locked out. Garrett's Memorial Fund account. User not recognized. I leaned back, jaw clenched. This wasn't accidental. This was a surgical removal. Clean, precise, and cruel. My inbox held another quiet blow. A system notification from the family trust manager. Your access has been revoked. For further assistance, please contact the account administrator, Carla Danvers. Of course! As I read that email, another ping came through, a medical portal alert. I clicked through and stared at the words until they became meaningless symbols. Emergency contact, none. They'd erased me even from the systems that knew my blood type. There was a sharp irony in that. I scrolled through my messages, hoping for some cousin, some uncle, some barely connected relative who might have said something. Anything. But no new messages had arrived since the night of the party. I opened the family group chat we'd all been part of for over a decade. Birthday wishes, last-minute dinner photos, holiday plans. All of it still there. Until the last line. You have been removed by Lori Danvers. I froze. I typed a message directly to my cousin Jamie. Hey, can you talk? No response. Tried my Aunt Sarah. I just want to know what's going on. Read. No reply. I clicked on the link Lori had sent a week ago for planning Dad's memorial. Now it said access denied. They hadn't just changed the locks. They'd moved the whole damn house. Leaning back in my chair, I let the glow of the screen wash over me. I wasn't sad anymore. I was sobered, like finally seeing the truth that had always been standing at the edge of the frame. I remembered Lori's 16th birthday. She got a charm bracelet from our parents. Everyone did. Except me. They told me mine got lost in shipping. It never came. I'd pretended not to care, smiled through it. I wanted to believe it was a fluke. I convinced myself it was. But it wasn't. It was a pattern. One I wasn't meant to notice until now. I closed the laptop slowly. If they erased me from the paperwork, I whispered, then I'll make sure I leave a mark elsewhere. The next morning, I pulled out a yellow legal pad from my kitchen drawer and began writing. A list. Every document Garrett had ever mentioned. Every financial account I once had access to. Every change I could trace. I drafted an email to the Danvers family accountant, formally requesting a complete transaction history of the trust since Garrett's death. I scheduled a consultation with the old law firm my father had worked with, marking it for Friday. If there was anything left in writing, anything hidden, tucked away, half forgotten, I would find it. By early evening, I had compiled timelines, logins, screenshots, and email threads. A small mountain of evidence that I once belonged, and now had been surgically extracted. But nothing punched quite like the final page I pulled from an old folder at the back of my desk. A financial statement dated just 6 months before Dad passed. It listed his estate holdings in full. At the bottom, handwritten in faint blue ink, transferred to alternate beneficiary, authorized by Carla Danvers. And right below that, my name. Crossed out, not erased, crossed out, not a mistake, a decision. I stared at that line, the ink bleeding slightly at the edge like it had been scrubbed. They didn't forget me. They planned to. The rain had started just after sunset, soft at first, then steady, like a warning tapped out on my windows. I sat cross-legged on my couch, still in yesterday's jeans, laptop open, but ignored. The air felt thick, not just with the storm outside, but with the weight of what I'd found 2 days ago. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the contact labeled simply, Mom. I hadn't called her in over a year. The last time we spoke without someone else in the room was before Garrett's health started declining. This wasn't the kind of call I should have made, but I needed something. Clarity, maybe. Closure. Or just proof that what they were doing wasn't a total betrayal. I tapped the screen and lifted the phone to my ear. She answered on the second ring, her tone rehearsed. Chanel? Hi, I said. I got a notice. My name's been removed from the trust portal. Bank access too. Was that intentional? A pause. Then that voice. Sweet, brittle, tired of pretending. If you'd signed like we asked, none of this would be necessary. I exhaled. That's not an answer, Carla. I'm not asking for a fight. I just want to understand. Why this? Why now? Why go this far? Silence. And then, in a tone so calm it could have been mistaken for casual, she said, We should have left you at the orphanage where we found you. My body went still. I didn't hang up. I didn't breathe. I just listened. But the line had already gone dead. As if the sentence had sucked the connection out of the air. The word played in my mind on a loop. Orphanage, orphanage, orphanage. I sat in the dark for what felt like hours, though it could have been minutes. I couldn't cry. My body refused. Instead, my limbs felt like stone, and my thoughts scattered in 100 different directions. Eventually, I stood. I walked to the hallway closet and opened the bottom drawer of a file cabinet I hadn't touched in years. My fingers knew exactly where to go. Muscle memory stronger than anything emotional. I pulled out a manila folder labeled in Garrett's handwriting. Danvers Custodial Filing, 1995. Inside, court documents, provisional guardianship papers, not adoption, a temporary legal tie. I scanned the pages, barely blinking. On the last sheet, in that same slanted script, Garrett had written, For trust validation only, do not contest. The room blurred. I leaned against the wall to steady myself. For trust validation, not out of love, not out of obligation, but because I was needed to fulfill a technicality. A moment rose from memory, fuzzy at first, then clear. I was maybe 9. We were at a church fundraiser, and I'd called Carla Mom in front of someone. She smiled tightly, pulled me aside, and whispered, Not in public, sweetheart. People won't understand. I thought it was about discretion, about protecting our privacy, but now I knew. It was about illusion. The illusion that I had a mother, that I was wanted, that I wasn't just a placeholder on legal forms. I sat on the floor beside the cabinet, my hand still gripping the folder. My heartbeat was slow now, but sharp, measured, focused. I didn't doubt Garrett loved me in his own way, the kind of love that didn't need to be spoken. He taught me to balance a checkbook before I could ride a bike. He remembered the exact brand of tea I liked. He always asked if I had gas in my car before he'd let me drive off. But this truth carved a different space in my chest, a place where grief and fury met like old enemies. When I finally stood up, I knew what I had to do. I found the number for Garrett's old estate attorney, not the ones Carla used now, but the firm he trusted before everything got tangled. The phone rang twice. Voicemail. I waited for the beep. Hi, this is Chanel Danvers. I'm trying to verify a guardianship clause from 1995 connected to Garrett Danvers. If there are any side letters, amendments, or sealed instructions, I need access." I paused, then added, "And if there's anything he kept from them, anything he wanted only me to know, I want to see it." The email arrived just after noon. Plain, formal, but unmistakably sharp in tone. "You are cordially invited to a community remembrance night for Garrett Danvers." At the bottom, in the corner where sympathy met strategy, were two names, Carla Danvers and Lori Danvers. I must have read it 3 times before I could blink. My father deserved better than a stage-managed farewell, especially one scripted by the two people who'd tried to write me out of everything he left behind. Still, I knew if I didn't show up, they'd control the story. And Garrett's memory wasn't something I was willing to surrender. By early evening, I pulled into the community center's lot, rain still lingering on my windshield. Inside, everything was polished and overdone. Tables lined with catered platters, floral arrangements that screamed donation money, and a projector screen so large it dwarfed the wooden cross on the back wall. I walked in alone. Not a single person greeted me, but eyes flicked my way like they'd been warned. Carla took the podium with the grace of someone used to being watched. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice soft, reverent. Garrett was a devoted husband, a generous father, and a man who took in others not because he had to, but because his heart made room. My fingers curled slightly around the folded program in my lap. She paused dramatically, then smiled toward the screen. "Let's begin with a short video honoring his journey and ours." The room dimmed. Soft piano music swelled from the speakers. Photos faded in and out. Garrett as a young man, building his first store. Him shaking hands with city officials, birthday parties, holidays, the usual. Then came the shift. My own childhood photo appeared on the screen, but not as a tribute. A voiceover, clearly Lori's, said, "Garrett and Carla took her in during a difficult time. It wasn't easy, but out of compassion, they made a choice. One that tested them, challenged them." The audience leaned in. A woman 2 rows ahead dabbed her eyes. More images played. Me as a preteen, me at family cookouts, me standing stiff next to Lori at school events. Each slide twisted what should have been memories into exhibits. "Not every child fits easily into a family," the narration continued. "But out of grace, we tried, and we learned. That love isn't always returned." My chest tightened. I looked around. Nobody seemed confused by the phrasing. They were nodding, accepting, absorbing a lie as if it were fact. They weren't just erasing me. They were monetizing my place in Garrett's story, turning me into a cautionary tale of failed charity. I stood, quietly, calmly. I didn't make a scene. That would have given them more footage. As I stepped out into the parking lot, the last words from the video still echoed in my ears. "Sometimes we give too much, and sometimes we don't realize it until it's too late." That night, back at my apartment, I opened the fireproof safe in my closet. Inside was a slim, dusty folder labeled Vital Records. I hadn't looked at it in years. I pulled out my birth certificate. My name was spelled correctly, except for one letter swapped with another. Easy to miss. My date of birth? Off by a day. I sat down and opened my laptop. After several failed logins and a phone call to the hospital records department, I finally got access to their system. According to the hospital, there was no birth on my supposed date of birth with my name. Nothing matched. A quiet panic began to rise. I picked up my phone and dialed the county records office. "Hi, I'm trying to confirm a correction on a birth record from the mid-90s, I said, trying to steady my voice. "Let me check," the clerk replied. I could hear typing in the background. "Yes, there's an amendment request filed about 20 years ago, authorized by a Carla Danvers." I swallowed hard. "Can you email me a copy?" A pause. "Sure. What's the address?" I I gave it, then hung up and sat still, the weight of a truth I hadn't asked for pressing down like the air before a thunderstorm. They didn't just try to remove me from Garrett's will. They'd rewritten who I was, on paper, in memory, in public perception. I wasn't just the inconvenient daughter anymore. I was a debt they'd never planned to pay. The text came from a number I hadn't saved, but recognized anyway. Leah, cousin on Garrett's side. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the last Thanksgiving, where I was allowed to sit at the adults' table, only to be asked halfway through dinner if I could help clean up early. But the message was blunt and didn't waste words. They're planning something big. Check your mail before agreeing to meet. I reread it twice, then looked toward the door like something might already be there. That afternoon, a plain white envelope lay on my doormat. No return address, no stamp. The paper was too thick, the seal too neat. It screamed planned. Inside, a contract spanning 6 pages, formatted like a standard estate transfer. My name filled the top, and at the bottom, a blank line for my signature. The first paragraph was enough. Voluntary relinquishment of rights, claims, and future interests to all properties, financial accounts, and trust designations associated with the Garrett L. Danvers estate. I didn't even blink. It took less than a day for the phone call to come. Carla's voice was syrupy smooth. "Chanel, sweetheart, why don't we talk this over like family? No need for lawyers, just you, me, and Lyle. We can meet at the Lakeside Club. It's private, relaxed, neutral ground." Neutral. That word. As if there were anything neutral about being boxed into a corner in the same country club where they'd once refused to renew my membership because the board decided not to extend courtesy benefits to non-direct heirs. I agreed, though. Of course I did. But I brought more than just myself. In my bag, a slim portable scanner, a pen with a recording function built into its clip, and a printed copy of the exact same document they'd already slid under my door. When I walked into that pristine, beige-toned room at the club, Carla stood immediately, arms extended, like we were reuniting after years of warmth instead of war. Lyle didn't stand. He just nodded and tapped the table in front of him. "Let's make this quick, Chanel." The same packet waited at my seat. Carla smiled. "Just a formality. Probate's easier when things are clear. We thought we'd spare you the hassle." I took my time sitting, opened my copy, opened theirs, scanned the headers. Identical. They really thought I'd fold, sign, smile, and maybe get a little thank you card in the mail afterward. "I see," I said, laying both copies side by side. "And this line, transferring full legal and residual interests without compensation, that's just part of the clarification?" Lyle cleared his throat. "Come on, don't twist it. Your father wouldn't want—" "If Dad wanted me to sign this," I interrupted, "he would have handed it to me himself." Carla's smile faltered just enough to show the edge behind it. "Chanel, sometimes the right thing doesn't feel fair in the moment." I looked up at her, calm, measured. "You can't guilt someone into disappearing. You already tried that once, remember? With the birth certificate." The air went cold. Neither of them replied. Not immediately. I stood, folded both copies of the document, and tucked them into my bag. Not because I needed to keep them, but because walking out with them felt like reclaiming something. At the door, Carla's voice dropped. "We all thought you'd be smart enough to just sign and move on." I turned to her, steady. "You still underestimate me, and that's your biggest mistake." I didn't expect the knock. Most days that week, I didn't expect much of anything. But there it was, sharp, deliberate. A courier stood at my door, holding a flat envelope with my name in block letters, no return address. Just like the one they'd left last time, except this one carried weight I hadn't prepared for. Inside, a certified letter, cream paper, thick as a threat. The header read, "Notice of cease and desist and formal termination of family rights." The first line, "Any further attempt to contest the estate of Garrett L. Danvers will result in full legal severance from the Danvers family, inclusive of name rights, familial associations, and inheritance standing." My hands didn't shake, not because it didn't hurt, but because I had expected this. I just hadn't expected it to be signed by Jerome Halton, the man who had once toasted Garrett at our 4th of July barbecue. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was our lawyer, my father's. His signature wasn't just ink. It was betrayal printed cleanly. For the first time in days, my grief gave way to something useful. Focus. I went back to my desk, opened my laptop, and searched Jerome's name. Not through the official sites, but through back channels, forum threads, legal watchdogs, former clients with too much time and nothing left to lose. The deeper I looked, the darker it got. Phrases like unethical tactics, coercive filings, blackmail with legal veneer. Most buried, settled out of court. But one name appeared in more than one story. Ava Holt. She was listed as the notary on Garrett's first will. Then gone. No forwarding firm, no new filings, just disappeared. I called a number listed in a 6-year-old real estate deed. A scratchy voice answered, "Ava speaking." I explained who I was. She was silent until I said Garrett's name. "You better come in person," she said. "I won't say a word over the phone." The next morning, I drove 40 minutes north, past the edge of town, to a cabin tucked between two ridgelines. Ava greeted me at the door, older than I remembered, but sharper than anyone I'd met in a courtroom. "You're him, aren't you?" she said. "You've got that look." "His daughter," I corrected gently. She didn't flinch. "You're the only one he trusted when the rest started circling." She handed me a folder before we even sat down. Inside were emails, legal notes, and one short handwritten letter in Garrett's slanted script. "Only Chanel will understand why I split the ledger. Only she'll protect what mattered." I scanned the contents. Then Ava spoke slowly. "Garrett came to me in 2014, said Jerome was helping hide a stock manipulation to protect the family business, but he feared what would happen if things went south." My stomach turned. "So he made a backup plan?" "He wrote a side letter, sealed it, said to give it to you, but Jerome got to it first. He never filed it, never mentioned it again. Garrett assumed it was done." "Do you have a copy?" "No," she said, "but I kept all the correspondence, enough to prove what happened." I drove back that afternoon with a new folder in my passenger seat and a plan forming in my head. They thought they could legally sever me, but I had the one thing they never planned for: truth tied to proof. That night, I scanned the key pages into a secure drive. Garrett's note, Ava's affidavit, the stock reports. I faxed an excerpt of the old ledger, the part with Garrett's handwritten allocation of family assets, to my attorney. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I sent a message directly to Jerome. "You want silence. I want the truth. Let's see who gets what first." The first time I felt it, it was subtle. A hesitation in the barista's voice when she asked if I wanted my usual. Her eyes never quite met mine. The second time, it was the woman near the back counter, flipping through a local newspaper, who leaned toward her friend and whispered, "That's the one from the article." I didn't need to ask. I pulled out my phone and searched my name. Front page of the Fort Collins Chronicle's community section. Adopted daughter challenges will. Danvers matriarch speaks out. A glossy photo of Carla standing next to Garrett's headstone, flowers in hand, pain painted perfectly across her face. The article didn't hold back. Unstable. Estranged. Emotionally volatile. It quoted her saying, "We did everything we could for Chanel. We took her in, loved her like our own. But sometimes, love isn't enough, especially when someone chooses chaos." There was no comment section, no way to respond. Just a narrative that now lived on every coffee table and inbox in town. They were going to destroy me from the inside out. Not just legally, publicly, personally. By the time I got home, my inbox was flooded. Half sympathetic, half accusatory. A few from people I hadn't spoken to in years. One from an old college friend. "You okay? Saw the piece? Didn't know it got that bad?" I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened my closet and pulled down a box labeled Health. It held every insurance claim, doctor's note, therapist's report from my 20s, a time when I sought help for anxiety, the kind you manage with breathing exercises, not padded rooms. But somehow, they twisted it into ammunition, weaponized wellness, mental health as character flaw, proof that I couldn't be trusted with money or memory. I stared at the file and felt a heat crawl up my spine. This wasn't just family betrayal anymore. It was strategic sabotage. That night, I scheduled a consultation with a local attorney I trusted. Not the kind who liked headlines, but the kind who filed clean, thorough records and knew how to apply pressure without making noise. We met the next morning. I slid the folder across the table. "They're painting me as unstable," I said. "I need a formal statement from you. Medical documentation, verification, history, all of it, certified." He nodded, already pulling out a pen. "We'll file responses to the paper. Demand retraction. You should also pull your own records. Request the sealed files. We'll lay it all out. Timeline, clean." I nodded back. "And I want everything notarized. If they want war, I'll give them proof." 2 days later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, Truth behind the headline. The body was short. "I've been watching this unfold. Something doesn't add up. I'm not with the Chronicle. I run an independent outlet. If you're ready to tell your story, the real one, I'm listening." I hesitated, then typed back, "Only if we meet in person. No recordings without my consent, and nothing runs without my approval." He replied instantly, "Fair. Tomorrow. Neutral place. My treat." We met at a diner near the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just coffee and old booths with cracked leather. His name was David. 40-something, sharp eyes. Listened more than he talked. That alone told me he wasn't there to use me. For the first time in weeks, I spoke. Not to defend myself, but to narrate. Start to finish. From the birthday ambush to the forged contracts. From the erased bank records to Carla's Sunday school performance at Garrett's memorial. I told him about Lori's message, the documents, Jerome, Ava, the letter Garrett never got to deliver, the birth certificate, the hospital records, the correction filed in secret. He didn't interrupt once. When I finally stopped, David leaned back and took a breath. "This isn't just a story," he said. "It's a takedown, engineered." I smiled. For once, not out of habit, but because I felt something settle into place. He pulled out his recorder. "Last thing. Off the record. If you could say one thing to them right now, what would it be?" I looked him square in the eye. "You taught me silence was loyalty," I said, voice steady. "Now I'll teach you how truth sounds when spoken clearly." The invitation came on heavy cardstock, mailed without a return address, but unmistakably theirs. Just one line above the RSVP number. "Please join us for a celebration of life honoring Garrett L. Danvers." It didn't say who it was from, but I didn't need to guess. I knew Carla's formal tone when I saw it, like wearing pearls to poison someone's tea. I wasn't surprised my name wasn't on the envelope. Still, I showed up. Not to participate, not to grieve, but to witness. I wore muted gray, kept my hair back, no makeup, nothing to draw attention. I chose a seat near the back, close enough to hear, but far enough to disappear if needed. The community hall buzzed with polite laughter and catered wine. Strangers mingled. Old church friends nodded solemnly. Lori and Carla stood near the stage, greeting people like they were hosting a gala, not mourning a man. The slideshow started just after 7. Lori approached the podium with tear-glossed eyes and a trembling voice perfected by years of theater. "Dad taught us strength, compassion, and loyalty," she began. "He believed in legacy, in building something that lasts." She spoke for 10 minutes, listing every grandchild, every nephew, every pillar of this family, and never once said my name. Not once. I saw the confusion on some faces near me. A woman glanced my way, unsure if she should smile or look away. I stayed still, hands folded, expression unreadable. Then Carla took the microphone. She thanked the guests, the church, the caterers. She spoke about Garrett's heart, his devotion to those he loved unconditionally, and then, without flinching, launched into what she called a final moment of prayer. "I ask God's forgiveness," she said, her voice cracking, "for the division caused by someone we tried so hard to love. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, people choose resentment over gratitude. We cannot carry their anger anymore." The room fell silent. Someone behind me whispered, "Poor woman." Another added, "Ungrateful kids these days." And all the while, a phone on a tripod streamed it live to Facebook. I stood up quietly and left. Outside, the night air felt thick. I walked toward my car, steady, until a voice called my name. It was Leah, the cousin who'd warned me before. She stepped out from between two parked cars, holding a manila envelope. "I couldn't keep this," she said. "It's dirty." I opened it. Inside, a notarized transfer deed, dated 2 weeks before Garrett died. My signature at the bottom, but I never signed it. Notarized by someone from Carla's church. The ink looked fresh, too fresh. I flipped the pages, scanning quickly. Every clause was a trap, every line a final strike. I didn't speak, didn't ask how Leah got it. I didn't need details. I already knew what this was, the endgame. But they'd misjudged one thing. I wasn't going to break. I went back inside, not to argue, not to scream, but to record. I pulled my phone from my coat, tapped the camera icon, and quietly filmed the rest of the ceremony. Carla posed with guests. Lori sobbed into her wine. No one noticed me. They wanted a war in public. I'd give them one in court. Back home, I laid the forged deed beside my legitimate documents, took side-by-side photos, then uploaded everything to my attorney's secure portal. Then, before I turned off the lights, I picked up my recorder. My name is Chanel Danvers, and tonight, my signature was forged onto a lie. I was never meant to be part of their story, but I'm about to rewrite the ending. I hadn't opened that bottom drawer in over a year. Dust had collected around the lock, but the key still turned the same, a soft click like a whisper before a storm. Inside sat a worn, leather-bound journal. Garrett's journal. He never let it leave his home office, and I never asked why. Now I knew. I flipped past pages of numbers and notes until I found the final entries, dated just weeks before he died. The handwriting was looser, but his thoughts were sharper than ever. "They will erase her if I'm not careful. They'll make her into something she never was. Or worse, nothing at all." My chest tightened. Chanel is the only one who understands why I split the ledger, the only one who'll remember what this family used to stand for, before it became theater. That sentence hit like a verdict. All the doubts, the gaslighting, the shame they tried to project onto me. He saw it coming, and he tried, in his own quiet way, to shield me. But I wasn't finished. I remembered Jordan, Garrett's former tech assistant, someone who knew every file, every drive, every click Garrett made in those final months. I sent a message. Short, simple. "Did Dad leave a final video?" He replied almost instantly. "Yes." But what was posted was edited. Lori handled it. Within an hour, I had the original file in my inbox. Password protected. Jordan didn't trust cloud servers. Garrett had trained him well. I watched it in my apartment that night. Blinds drawn, lights off. I sat on the floor, laptop on the coffee table, legs crossed like a child at story time. Garrett sat in his favorite chair. Behind him, the oak bookshelf he refused to let Carla replace. His voice cracked only once. "If you're watching this, it means something's been taken. Maybe from me, maybe from her. Either way, you need to know. Chanel earned everything I left her. Not through blood, but through truth, through grit." He looked away, eyes moist. The business, the values, they're hers, because she protected them when no one else did. And if they've tried to silence her, I ask you to listen harder. I let the video run twice. Not for detail, for weight. Then, I acted. I made 2 encrypted copies. One I stored in a private drive. The other I handed to my attorney the next morning, along with the journal. Together, they formed the core of my next move. A formal motion to block all pending asset transfers based on fraud, forgery, and concealment of final instructions. By afternoon, I had organized every supporting document, timestamps, signatures, notary irregularities, chain of custody gaps. I added a short affidavit explaining the contrast between the public and private versions of Garrett's legacy. But the moment that stayed with me wasn't legal. It was emotional. That night, I put on headphones, turned off every light, and watched the video again. In that silence, broken only by Garrett's voice, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I wasn't alone. Not then, not really. They wanted me to question my memory, my stability, my worth. But Garrett? He left me a record, and in doing so, he gave me back my voice. I opened a private video account and uploaded a 2-minute clip. Garrett's direct quote, untouched. Then I drafted the caption. When the truth was edited out, this is what remained. The TV was already on when I entered the kitchen that morning. I hadn't turned it on, which made the sound of Carla's voice even more jarring. I stood frozen with the coffee pot halfway to the machine as her image filled the screen. Soft makeup, pearl earrings, and a black blouse cut just right for sincerity. I tried everything, she said, voice breaking in a carefully timed pause. We opened our home, our hearts. But some people carry so much pain, they mistake love for control. The Chiron read, Exclusive, Carla Danvers on family betrayal, estate chaos. I didn't need to watch the rest. I'd lived the unedited version. Her interview was filled with half-truths, strategic omissions, and lines designed to wound without leaving fingerprints. I turned off the TV and let the silence settle around me. Let her talk. I had something better than spin. Garrett's voice. Back in my bedroom, I opened the secure folder Ava had helped me access. Inside it, among affidavits and transcripts, was the backup audio Garrett had once sent to Jerome. A recording never meant for public ears, but made for one purpose: protection. His voice crackled slightly, but was clear. If this ever turns ugly, she must not be left defenseless. I gave her everything with intention. She was never temporary. I pressed pause and exhaled slowly. He knew. Years ago, he saw it all coming. The hardest part wasn't hearing the words. It was realizing how many times I doubted them, that maybe I wasn't worth the fight, that maybe I was the storm they said I brought. But Garrett had anchored my name to something deeper than their version. He made sure I had more than memory. He gave me evidence. I spent the next hour organizing the recordings, the journal entries, the legal correspondence, and everything Ava had verified. I built a binder that wasn't just about defense. It was a map, one that pointed not to the past, but to the future. I had options now. Instead of releasing the recordings, I sent selected transcripts to my attorney, attaching a notarized affidavit outlining their origin and significance. I didn't need the public to see it, not yet. My fight wasn't about headlines anymore. It was about precision. That afternoon, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. Subject: Danvers Legacy, Misrepresentation Concern. The body read, I watched the memorial video. I saw the edit. I knew Garrett for 30 years. He would have never agreed to this. If you need a statement, I'm in. Signed, Thomas Heller, a name I hadn't heard since childhood, one of Garrett's oldest business partners. It hit me in the best way. I wasn't alone anymore. Later that week, I drove to the old headquarters of Garrett's first company. It had been mostly shuttered after the merger, but the front office still bore the plaque he'd installed decades ago, built with purpose. I walked through the lobby, ran my fingers along the receptionist's desk, and stood at the threshold of his old office. Dust had settled, but the chair still faced the window, just like he used to keep it. I sat down, let the weight of the leather press against my back, and looked out at the parking lot that once bustled with his staff, his team. I didn't cry. I breathed. This wasn't about me anymore, not just me. This was about the work he believed in, the reputation they tried to twist, the foundation he laid brick by brick, not just for me, but for every person who believed in ethics over inheritance. I opened my tote and pulled out a framed photo, the only one where he and I stood shoulder to shoulder, both smiling at something off camera. I placed it on his desk beneath the plaque. They tried to rewrite the ending. I'm writing the future instead. The wooden box had been sitting untouched in the back of my closet since the day of Garrett's funeral. I hadn't had the courage to open it, and I told myself that was out of respect. But the truth? I was afraid. Afraid of what I might find, or worse, what I wouldn't. I pulled it down now with steady hands. Inside, under an old pair of gloves and a folded sweater I didn't remember keeping, was a single envelope. It was sealed. My name written across the front in Garrett's handwriting, confident, deliberate. I took a deep breath and opened it. If they ever turn against you, you already know who you are. And if they don't, still be who you are. That was it. No instructions, no legal clauses, just a sentence. A reminder that who I was never depended on their permission to exist. I folded the letter slowly and held it for a moment, letting the weight of it ground me. 2 days later, Leah stopped by unannounced. She didn't knock like someone on official business, just a soft rap on the door with the side of her fist. I let her in without a word. She looked tired, like someone who had carried too much silence too long. I knew things were off, she said, eyes down. I didn't speak up. I'm not proud of that. But I'm here now. I didn't offer a hug. Didn't cry. We weren't built for that. But I nodded, and that was enough. I'm learning, I said quietly, that family isn't who keeps your secrets. It's who honors your voice. She nodded. Then let's start over, if you'll let me. Later that week, my attorney forwarded an email from Carla's lawyer, a proposal for mediation. No apology, of course. Just a gesture of peace. A financial offer. Conditions. No press. No legal filings. No further contact. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing my reply. Silence isn't peace, and money isn't an apology. I declined. Not because I needed to win, but because I'd finally learned what clarity feels like. The next day, I filed official documents to assume stewardship over a portion of Garrett's charitable foundation. It was the part he'd left undefined, reserved for future leadership. His language, not theirs. I began vetting potential board members, quiet people, ethical people, people who'd worked, not inherited. Later that afternoon, I visited the warehouse Garrett had once walked me through when I was 16, told me it might all be mine one day. Back then, I thought he was humoring me. Now, I saw it for what it was. A signal. He was never waiting for permission from anyone else. Neither was I. That night, I opened a blank document on my laptop. For the first time since this started, I wasn't writing a statement or a timeline. I wrote a story, just for me. A short one, fiction, technically, but every sentence carried my fingerprint. They never asked who I wanted to become. Now I didn't need their permission to decide. I returned to the wooden box in my closet, carefully folded Garrett's letter, and placed it back in. Beside it, I added a new one. My own handwriting, my own voice. For the next girl who thinks she doesn't belong, maybe this will tell her otherwise. Courtrooms are rarely quiet for long, but that day, after the video played, there was nothing. Not a whisper, not a cough, not even the hum of the old air vents above the gallery. Garrett's voice lingered in the stillness like a benediction. Everything I've built is for Chanel, he had said on that uncut birthday video, the one Lori never meant for anyone to see. Because she showed up when no one else did. Because she earned it. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my attorney silent beside me, waiting for the judge to speak. Carla and Lori were seated across the aisle, faces rigid, painted for sympathy. But their expressions cracked when the video ended. Their confidence bled out, frame by frame. The judge finally leaned forward, glasses in hand. This court finds that the evidence of forgery, falsification of records, and intentional misrepresentation is substantial. The transfer of assets in dispute is voided. His gaze shifted toward Carla and Lori. You are hereby removed as trustees and barred from participating in future Danvers estate affairs. Additionally, financial penalties will be issued, and a correction to the public record will be filed, naming Chanel Danvers as the rightful heir to the primary estate of Garrett L. Danvers. I didn't smile. I didn't look at them. I just exhaled. By the time I stepped out of the courthouse, my phone was already vibrating. Notifications from friends, messages from reporters, screenshots of the breaking news article titled, "Daughter Reclaims Legacy After Stunning Courtroom Reveal." But I stayed silent. Let the footage speak. David, the independent journalist who had believed me from the start, posted the full story. The real story, not the edited one, not the spin, just the truth, clear as Garrett's voice on that video. The comments section exploded. She held her ground. Lori and Carla should be ashamed. Finally, justice. But I didn't reply to any of them. A week later, I returned to the Danvers Foundation building. It no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like possibility. I didn't step into the boardroom as a daughter trying to prove herself anymore. I stepped in as the woman Garrett believed in, the one he prepared all this for. I changed the signage outside, from Danvers Family Trust to Danvers Foundation for Ethical Legacy. Not for optics, but for purpose. We restructured everything, prioritized financial literacy programs for women who'd been cut out of their family assets, built mentorship circles for young people aging out of foster care, made the entire mission about inheritance justice, not wealth, but dignity. Leah joined the board. So did Thomas Heller, Garrett's longtime business partner, who testified on my behalf. We didn't mention Carla or Lori in any of the materials. And then, without warning, a letter arrived. Neatly folded, sealed in a plain white envelope, from Carla. We never meant to hurt you. We were afraid. That was it. No apology. Just fear disguised as regret. I replied with a single sentence. Fear doesn't justify erasure, but now I understand it. I didn't forgive her, but I didn't carry her anymore, either. Weeks later, I walked through Garrett's old office, now mine. The walls still carried his scent, wood polish, and old books. I paused at his portrait, then opened a small velvet box I'd been holding in my hand. Inside, 2 brass plaques. I placed the first beneath his photo. To the one who saw me when no one else did. And beside it, the second, etched clean, deep, permanent. Director, Chanel Danvers. Sometimes, the fight isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were right to stand your ground. My story isn't unique because of the betrayal or the courtroom. It's because I chose not to let silence define me. I chose to be the voice they tried to mute. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Your name, your worth, your place. None of it should be conditional. To anyone out there feeling erased, overlooked, or rewritten by their own family. You are not alone. Truth has a way of resurfacing. And when it does, it speaks louder than any lie whispered behind your back. So I ask you, what legacy are you protecting? And what would you be willing to risk to make it yours? If this story touched you, let me know by leaving a comment with the number 1, or tell me where you're watching from. If this video didn't land for you, I'd love to hear why, and where you are in your own journey. Let's start a conversation. And if you believe in stories that matter, voices that rise, and truth that echoes, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. There are more stories coming. Yours might be next.